The idea of historical importance, I just love that, because historical importance is such a subjective phrase. I mean, what is historically important? Historical importance is, the number one overriding factor in terms of how to determine a collection development strategy from the perspective that I have, and I think that's shared by many of my colleagues. The second one is obviously opportunity. You can't just spin archives out of existence. You have to ask what's available, when, and for how much. People don't understand what is an archive, right? People don't understand that. People who own it don't understand it. So they look at this mess in their attic or this mess in their cellar or in the cupboards, and they say, okay, I could really use a new refrigerator, so I'm going to, get rid of this, and I'll get rid of that. And before you know it, an entire archive has gone into the four corners of the earth, and you'll never have that archive back again.
It is the joy of archives, is that if you go in without trying to be determined to see what you wish to see, but allow it to sort of, to come out from the archive, then you begin to sort of have a sense of what its importance is, what its place is, what it tells you, what it doesn't tell you. And that becomes, for me, part of how one prices an archive. It is that sense of how many stories does this archive tell? How many ways are there into it? Who can use it? Will two people using it use it up? Is it something where, there's some wonderful manuscripts, but someone will edit them and it will then just be, somebody going back in and saying, actually, I read that as a semicolon, not as a full stop. Something like the Laurence Olivier archive, which had a very substantial price tag. It was, however, also really the archive for the whole creation of the National Theatre and for Laurence Olivier Productions and for the business side of things. And you looked at it and you thought, whether you're interested in theatre or in Shakespeare, in film, in the economics of theatre versus film, in the individual writers or the people who were friends, that you could come at that archive from 100 different perspectives and not use it up. And I do believe that the historical and research value and the heritage value lies in keeping archives together. Context is crucial. That wonderful single autograph letter, is it one of dozens that he wrote to this woman? Is it the sole surviving letter? Because it's the only one that was ever written. How do we know what else was going on in the writer's life at the time, and what else was going on in the world? So every archive has is a context, but then cumulatively, those archives also create a bigger and richer picture.
In our acquisitions work, the British Library essentially occupies a dual role. At the same time as working to develop our own collections as the leading repository for literary collections in the UK, we act as neutral advisors to depositors and to other institutions. Mindful of the idea of the principle of appropriateness, appropriateness of location and appropriateness of context in determining a permanent home for an archive. And very conscious, of course, that no single institution can do it all.
In order for us to read, if someone's giving us old floppies or old computer files and we can't read them on our current one, we actually have, you have perhaps in your basements or in your attic or go on eBay, you can find these old computers. And so we have a room that we've dedicated over and that we share with the University Archives to help us with this. Partly the assumption is that if we're buying an archive from a bookseller and they're charging a price above, if it's a paper archive, we expect a certain amount of description and organization by the bookseller. And so the same logic applies to digital. So what sort of work have they done? You know, we expect them to have looked at the email. So what's in the email? Some concept of, just like they would describe to us in a paper form, you know, this includes 500 letters from so-and-so, this represents the first part of their life or the second part or whatever it is. Well, the same thing should be expected of a digital archive. And so partly it's to help us evaluate what's being offered to us to say, okay, is this actually worth what we're being, it's priced at?
Real kind of take on the challenge of born digital archives is, don't think of it as a technical digital problem. It's an archival problem that might need a technical solution. And most of the things that make it difficult, or at least half the things that make it difficult, are things like copyright, privacy, data protection, publication, access, mediation, archivist knowledge. They're not, you know, I mean, obviously how to preserve the stuff and stop it deteriorating is a problem, but that's only half the problem. Half of the problems are archival problems that might need technical solutions. At Stanford, someone developed software that will help you map the content of emails. It will show you networks of emails. And this is Robert Creeley, which is one of the collections that Stanford worked on as part of the AIMS project. So that's his email world. And that, I mean, I'm sure kind of scholars would be interested in, suddenly an email inbox becomes interesting if you can see it like that.